Hi everybody, this is John Sneisen from World Alternative Media, and we're still in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, and I have the pleasure to introduce you guys to Patrick Wood, which is the author of Technocracy Rising, the Trojan horse of the global transformation, and of course you're one of the most renowned experts on the Trilateral Commission. So I want to really thank you for joining us today, Patrick.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's great to do it.
Yeah, awesome. So can you tell our viewers about the global elitist plan to replace capitalism with a technocracy, and what technocracy is for those who don't know the term?
I know, that's about a 2-hour lecture right there. The overall goal of the global elite, if you will, we'll name those as we go along, some of them, is to subvert the resources of the world out of our hands and into their hands. It's a pretty simple shell game, actually. It's not complicated to understand, but the idea of taking property away from private citizens and from states and from governments in general involves very high-level manipulation of the political system. I think we'll be okay. There's a little chatter down there. But their idea to subvert the resources of the world is well underway, has been for almost 40 years. And technocracy plays into to this economic system that they're creating to support their, I want to say, thievery or their, confiscation of property. Technocracy was defined as an economic system in 1932, starting in 1932. And it was a system based on resources that would have energy as a currency. It's very otherworldly. People just can't hardly identify with what that means. But we grew up with free enterprise capitalism. There's a currency. You have a currency in Canada. We have a currency here. This is ingrained in us. But the technocracy system is to be based on energy distribution and consumption, where users or where citizens would just receive an allocation of energy credits, like that would be their money, if you will.
Yeah.
And they'd have to spend their energy credits before the period is up, like maybe a month or a quarter. And if they ran out of energy credits, they were flat out of luck. And
Too bad for you.
And if you had energy credits left over at the end of the period, they would simply disappear, and you'd get your new allocation for the next period of time.
So it's basically the government, like the technocracy, actually giving you the energy credit, basically.
That was the idea. That was the original idea of technocracy, was to have energy at the center of the economic system, and it was to act like an accounting system. Like we have an accounting system. People talk about accounting now. Well, debits and credits and stuff, but. This system that was dreamed up in the heat of the Depression was really cracked. It was more like a model of utopia that was drawn up by engineers and scientists, mostly at Columbia University in that day, and they drew it up in a vacuum. They didn't consult anybody. They just did it.
Yeah.
And they thought, well, we're the smart ones around here. We've got the PhDs, we got we work for the prestigious university, and we're pretty cool. I used the word cool back then, but you know what I mean. They had big heads. They were inflated way beyond where they should have been. And so they devised this economic system that they intended to enact over North America, over the whole North American continent. And what was preposterous, just to give you an idea of the mindset that they had, they included Canada, Mexico, and all of Central America and most of the northern part of South America in what they called their North American technate. They had reasons for it. But they drew the map, and it's just the map. All of Canada, all the United States is going to be one big happy North American technate. They never said how they were going to get the Canadians to go along.
Yeah.
Or the Mexicans.
Yeah, exactly.
Or Costa Rica. Or these other countries. They never had a plan for that, which is scary, because were they planning military conquests, like, or what? Or did they just expect that people everywhere in their area would be so, what's the right word I want to say, that they would be so impressed by their system, they'd just go, oh, we'll give up everything we have and give everything to you.
Yeah.
Like that's ever going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, so it was a very odd system. It was very popular in Canada, I might add. There was between America, the United States, and Canada, there were over 400,000 card-carrying members of the Technocracy membership organizations, and it was really big in Canada, especially in British Columbia.
Which I know the reasons why they still have an extreme leftist government there. Still.
Yes, they're very technocratic. I might add. They were the leaders of the pack on smart grid, for instance, in Canada, implementing smart grid. It's since backfired a bit, but people are starting to catch on up there. What's going on? And interestingly enough, when I was researching technocracy in the first place, and being very frustrated with the lack of information that I could find, I'm working with a Canadian researcher, actually, a friend of mine by the name of Carl Tyker, an excellent researcher. He located an archive at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. And what had happened is all the leaders of technocracy from Canada, all the 4 provinces, got together before they passed, and they said, we need to leave a legacy for history, so what will we do with all of our papers? This is back in the 90s. And they talked the University of Alberta into creating, making an archive for them, basically just as boxes in a warehouse. Yeah. But they did that. And so I traveled up to Edmonton with my wife. We spent a week up there. And they gave us access to the copy machines in the room and a big conference table to spread everything out on. And I said, well, when you're done with that cart, they brought out a big cart full of boxes. And, well, when you're done with that cart, give us a whistle, we'll bring out the next one. They did that all week.
Wow.
And I went through every single box that they brought out. I was like a kid in a candy store. I mean, this is all the original letters, all the original magazines. Oh, wow. There was pictures, personal letters between the director of Technocracy and all the different leaders and stuff. I mean, it was like looking into their mind.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. So anyway, I owe something to Canada for saving that information. They told me at the university, just anecdotally, they told me that they wanted to, when the technocrats originally approached them, they wanted them to create, here's our information, we'd like you to create a chair of technocracy at the university. It's like, okay. And they said, well, you got $1 million to go along with your load of boxes and books and stuff, Well, no. So, well, we're not going to give you a seat of technology or a chair of technology, to appoint a professor to it or whatever. Yeah. And they talked them into just taking the boxes and putting them in the warehouse, and acid-free, cardboard boxes for posterity. And turned out I wasn't the first one that ever looked at the archive. There'd been a couple of others since the mid-90s. But they were surprised that somebody was interested, Yeah. Oh, okay, whatever floats your boat. Yeah. They brought it all out and let me look at it. And a lot of that information is in my book that I used it to build up my thesis. So anyway, that's kind of where, that's kind of some of the history of technocracy, and I suppose now maybe we want to go into how it got here, or what.
Yeah, well, we're gonna talk a little bit about different things, but when it comes to the technocracy, and how did this idea really come to fruition, and who's behind the technocracy idea, and where is it today?
Right. Originally, this is a surprise to most people that I bring this up to, but back in the 1930s, this was in the Great Depression, and they were 3 years into it at that point, after the great Wall Street crash in 1929. There were soup lines everywhere. People were broke, kicked out of their homes, displaced. That was a terrible time. It really was. And these scientists and engineers at Columbia University and other places and stuff that were in close proximity, they felt like capitalism was going to die. They believed that, and that it was a goner, and that it was just going to expire. I guess I don't know what they believed, but they thought it was just going to die and collapse. And so that's what really motivated them to create this alternative economic system to replace it when it did collapse. There'd been talk of this for at least 20 years before that, though. It didn't come out of a vacuum. Like one day somebody had, I got an idea, let's all get together in the conference room and we'll make it an economic system. They've been talking about it for several years, and you had people like Taylor, for instance, and Gantt that were involved. They were the project management people of that day. Well, they had a bunch of stuff that it's kind of Taylorism was a big thing, for organizing projects and factories and stuff like that, automation. And, electricity was really rolling out at that point. There was a lot of people dealing with the elements, the first part of electricity. That was a new technology. You had the development of all the mass manufactured, like automobile plants and stuff were going on. So, there was a lot of business activity, but then there was a lot of political activity. You had the Bolshevik Revolution in 1918. You had the World War I, which was horrible.
Yeah.
You had the U.S. Communist Party was big in America, given that Russia had fallen into the communist hands, and there was a number of philosophies that were floating around in that day as well. Not that weren't communistic necessarily. There was fascist ideologies, and there were some, a bunch of religious cults too were floating around. Marxism was floating around. I mean, it was a very confusing era, I think. But out of that cauldron, I call it, it's like a stew of ideas. These engineers got together and said, well, we can do something here. We can add something to the pot. And when coffee houses are full of ideologues talking about the latest and greatest thing, right? You might expect that the engineers and scientists might be a little bit jealous that they're left out. Well, we don't want to go to that coffee house and talk about Marxism. No. But we can do something ourselves to be the latest and greatest. And honestly, I think that's kind of how they came ultimately to the idea that we could just do this and forget all this other stuff. Forget the Marxism, forget the communism. And technocrats hated communists, by the way. People find that hard to believe, but I found letters to that effect, multiple letters.
Really?
When people used to accuse them of being communists, they get mad or wet hand. And how dare you? No, we're not communists. Don't you dare call us communists. It's like, oh, okay. What are you? What are you then? Because there's a lot of similarities. You look at both of them are totalitarian. But they saw the distinction between what they were doing, and they wanted to claim ownership. It was invented under their watch. Communism to them was like, it may be totalitarian, but for all the wrong reasons. Yeah. They had the right reasons.
Of course,
they thought, of course.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. So, with Agenda 21 and now the new Agenda 2030 coming out, what is the ultimate goal of these globalists that are behind these ideas in implementing this control complex based on the depopulation and regulation and all this extortion?
Right. Well, the track that I document in my book, Technocracy Rising, goes back to 1973 with the founding of this elitist organization called the Trilateral Commission, founded by David Rockefeller and Zbigniew Brzezinski.
The usual suspects.
Yeah. Brzezinski happened to be a professor of political science at Columbia University when he wrote his book called Between Two Ages, one of his early works, and it was a seminal work for him because it caught the eye of David Rockefeller. And the Rockefeller family had a long history of interaction with Columbia University anyway, so they were pretty close. And Brzezinski was a professor there, kind of a bright young guy that was making his mark on the world. He wrote this book, Between Two Ages. The subtitle was America's Role in the Technotronic Era. We didn't think, my co-author and I, Professor Anthony Sutton, back in the 70s, we didn't think much of the book. We read the book and we used the book as part of our documentation for what Brzezinski would later do with Rockefeller. But we didn't know anything about technocracy. So the word technotronic meant nothing to us.
Yeah.
You say, okay, well, it's a technical age, technology is rising. We just figured that's all it meant. So we didn't really get what he was saying. But Columbia University is where technocracy started.
Yeah, exactly.
So here's Brzezinski working at, and he comes out with a book using the word technotronic. And immediately I thought, I wonder if there's a connection between, So I went back and I read his book again. And I immediately found out that the themes and policies that he was espousing in his book were very much in line with original historic technocracy, right? Now I'm on a trail. Now the bloodhound comes out in there, right?
Yeah.
So when Brzezinski and Rockefeller got together to start the Trilateral Commission, the first thing they said in their literature, this was like a rubber stamp on everything they did, that they were going to create a new international economic order. 4 words, always it's like a tagline, right?
Yeah.
Marketing tagline, new international economic order. We didn't understand what the word new meant because we didn't understand technocracy.
Yeah.
But now I do. Now having discovered technocracy, I look back at what they've done and I see, bingo. When they said new, in their mind, they were bringing this old alternative economic system back to life.
Into the new era.
Technocracy. There was no other economic system ever devised in history other than technocracy. There's nothing else. You go back thousands of years, you won't find anything else. So technocracy was new. Well, it was old, but it was new. And Rockefeller decided we could put legs on this beast, right? And so the Trilateral Commission worked in early years to foster their so-called new international economic order. And we see it progressing, for instance, when Gru Harlem Brundtland came to the scene from 1983 to 1987. She chaired a commission that was sponsored by the United Nations. And at the end of that time, she produced a book called Our Common Future. Well, backstory, Gru Brundtland was a member of the Trilateral Commission. So she devised this book, which the United Nations then took as the primary doctrine that went into Agenda 21 in 1992, when the Rio de Janeiro conference took place, the first Earth Summit. That book was the centerpiece of the Agenda 21 doctrine, or just the text for it, the book that was produced.
Yeah, funny you're talking about Gro Harlem Brundtland. Gro Harlem Brundtland comes from the Norwegian Workers' Party. Mm-hmm. She used to be the head of the and Prime Minister in Norway for several years.
That's right.
I remember.
And she was a Minister of the Environment before that.
Yeah.
That's kind of how she rose up. So the United Nations thought she was qualified for it, but by that time, see, she'd been inducted into the Trilateral Commission in the European division of that. So she was rubbing shoulders with the Rockefeller types, in America and also in Europe. Very powerful people.
Yeah.
And she had no power in herself, mind you. She was not a Rockefeller. She wasn't the chairman of Citicorp.
Yeah.
She was basically an environmentalist.
Yeah.
And so they inducted her, and she produced this book, Our Common Future, which I am convinced was Trilateral Commission policy. This is the way these people have worked over the years. So the United Nations later praised her for being the mother of Agenda 21. They said, man, if it wasn't for her, we would never have had it. So there's no doubt it was her that did it. It was her that produced it. She was the strong woman of the task force, right? She led and directed the task force to come to this conclusion. But in that, the doctrine of sustainable development was brought out. She was the one that popularized that term, defined it. The term had been used earlier than that, but nothing was ever done with it. She made a doctrine out of it, sustainable development, and that's exactly what got embedded into Agenda 21. Sustainable development. That's where it came from.
Yeah.
Was from the bowels of the Trilateral Commission. So the United Nations runs with this. They create this new Agenda 21. That was the agenda for the 21st century. And sustainable development came along, and it just, it went wild. Everybody, said, oh, something new, it's not communism, it's not socialism, something new. Nobody questioned, what is this sustainable development, which is a business term. You can tell it's not political. Development is business. You don't use the term, the word development ever in politics. So you have a new business term being used, and as we know now, sustainable development to the United Nations is a very highly defined economic system that is completely opposed to free enterprise and capitalism. And we know from the director of climate change at the UN herself, back 2 years ago, Christiana Figueres, that the United Nations intends specifically to replace capitalism and free enterprise with sustainable development.
Right.
That's technocracy from the neo-technocracy, let's call it that, right? So it's been an ingenious plan that they've executed here. Nobody saw it coming, basically. I can look backwards and see how they did it now, even though I didn't recognize it when they did it, right? But I can see it now. And we see their fingerprints all over this stuff. Every time you turn around, I see something else.
Right.
A good example is Peter Sutherland, who is a hugely important member of the Trilateral Commission from Europe, and he was the first president of the World Trade Organization. He is currently the United Nations Special Envoy or something to the Secretary General for Migration Policy. He was managing director or executive director or something of Goldman Sachs for like 20 years. This guy's a bigwig.
Yeah.
I mean, he really is.
Oh, yeah.
So he started out in 2006 in his United Nations post to go around to all the nations in Europe, pound on the table, and say you need to establish migration quotas. This was before the invasion started.
Back a couple of years ago.
And so you ask, was this a premeditated policy being put out? Well, absolutely. So he got the can opener out, if you will, and went around the nation, went to Germany and all, whatever, France, all of us said, you need to set migration quotas. They had no idea what they were setting up, but they set them up. And this was Trilateral Commission policy. And this was a guy who said publicly that the only way to implement sustainable development is through a multicultural society. Oh my gosh, this crazy talk.
Yeah.
But this is the policy they believe. So the invasion starts in Canada. Countries start to go nuts because they can't handle the pressure, and the women are getting raped, and the people are getting robbed, mugged, killed, stabbed, and whatever, and neighborhoods are being taken over and degraded, and the people of the countries are just saying, man, stop this stuff.
Yeah.
But see, it was all according to the quotas that they set up before, that they let these people in. The United Nations and Peter Sutherland, this is about a year ago when it was really hot and heavy. The United Nations, including Peter Sutherland, had the brass to scold the individual European countries. Don't you dare go back on your quotas.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
No kidding.
I couldn't believe it. So, you see their fingerprints all over this, this implementation of sustainable development. And it's really, in my opinion, very strong opinion, it's nothing more than warmed over technocracy from the 1930s.
Right.
But those people back then got no money from the Rockefellers. They did get support for a while from Columbia University, but they got no money. They had no grant money, no nothing.
And they didn't have the funding.
They were up. They didn't have any funding to go anywhere. So the idea just kind of fizzled. But when Rockefeller met Brzezinski, boy, that was I'd say with tongue in cheek, that's
Terrible.
a marriage in hell.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
a toxic tonic.
the beauty and the beast. I know, it's the beauty and the beast, right? And when they married the ideology of Brzezinski to the money and the monopolistic greed of the Rockefellers, you had a formula brewing for untold evil and pain in the world.
Yeah, no kidding.
Fast forward to 2016, and we see the pain all over the world.
Yeah. So, with that, like, Canada is implementing a federal carbon. Well, they're trying to, anyways. Which is sure to negatively affect the small businesses, of course, the poor, and then further propping up gigantic corporate monopolies that we have.
Yes.
How does the technocracy play into this agenda and why should Canadian be concerned?
Oh, wow. Well, from a citizen point of view, you should be most concerned about your personal rights being degraded. I think on the basic level, that's what you need to look at.
Right.
When you are constrained by regulations, by whether they're statutes or just something somebody came up with, whatever, or if it affects your property, like if you own a house or real estate or something like that, when your rights are constrained, you're moving towards tyranny. It's the wrong direction. What has traditionally made America great and Canada great and even Great Britain great over the centuries has been its respect for personal, for private property.
Yeah.
And citizens had rights that were protected by the law. They had rights to, and of course that's been up and down, but they've had rights to, for instance, to free speech. You had rights to move about where you wanted to move about. You had rights to develop a business if you wanted to, without undue crushing, no, you just can't do that. And because you had those rights over the decades, you were able to prosper. And we were able to prosper. And somebody would argue, well, maybe Canada didn't prosper as much as we did for whatever reason. And there's been a lot of Canadians that came down from Canada and said, we're going to the United States to live. We can't take it up here anymore. But the reason they couldn't take it up there anymore is because their rights had been chipped away so bad that they finally threw up their hands and say, screw this.
Oh, exactly.
I'm not going to take it anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Well, now some Americans are saying, we're out of here, we're going back to Canada. But that's another story. Fortunately, we're friendly with each other, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I know. So, actually, I guess we're sending back the people that all the liberals that voted for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, that's the terrible thing, we don't need any more liberals in Canada.
No,
the liberals have, they've been in power for very little, and they've destroyed a lot already.
I know.
It's just
horrible.
a terrible,
really
terrible
horrible.
concoction that the Canadians have created.
Yeah.
So and this carbon tax that they're pushing now, and with the Congress and what you presented and everybody else that have been here, this whole man-made, this whole scare, that they created, it's just a scare. That's basically what it is. Yeah, we will have some warming, but the climate changes. It moves up and down. The temperature goes up and down, and unfortunately, there's not very much we could really do about it.
You can't. And this conference, of course, that we just been to is on debunking the phony climate science that has been floating around. The global warmists, as I call them.
Yeah.
And one of the major points that I made in my talk yesterday was that the whole global warming mantra is merely a scaremonger tactic to drive people to the solution, their preferred solution of sustainable development.
Right.
It was created for that. And the proof of that is I have a perspective of over 40 years of watching this thing now, which when you have a little bit of history behind it, you've seen stuff in the past that they tried the same thing in the 70s. The same plan that they're using on us today, they tried it and failed miserably in the 1970s. Back then, it was global cooling. And they said, we're all going to freeze to death, and it's your fault, and we have to impose controls and blah, 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 right?
Yeah, right.
We have to do this stuff. And the global elite orchestrated a huge energy crisis. They disrupted the Middle East. The supply of oil to America was interrupted, and all of a sudden, gas prices at the pump went from like 50 cents to $3, boom, almost overnight. There was lines around the block for every gas station in town. People were irate. It was just horrible time. Energy crisis, global cooling crisis. Oh my gosh, we need an economic solution for this, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, they didn't have their ducks lined up in a row quite as good as they thought back then. So by the beginning of the 1980s, they concluded we need to rethink this. We need to do better. We need to have a different plan, a different program. We need to think our strategy through a little bit better and how we're going to get there. What came out of their thinking was we need a new marketing plan.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, their marketing plan failed completely, and they had to employ a new marketing strategy.
So what shows up other than Gru Brundtland, and she goes into the United Nations and she feeds them this crapola with our common future, which is all the stuff that went into Agenda 21, sustainable development, resource-based economy, limiting energy, crushing all hydrocarbon fuel.
Yeah.
And because, see, the technocrats can't control hydrocarbon fuel. They can't. It's in the ground. They can't.
Yeah.
People keep bringing it up.
Yeah.
They keep drilling new wells and finding massive new oil fields. And they had this. I got to say this on a side note because it's interesting. One of the co-founders of Technocracy Incorporated was a man by the name of M. King Hubbard. He was a geophysicist and a very bright guy, I might add. He left Technocracy officially when he went to work for a major oil company in 1948, 6, 7, 8, something like that. He left Technocracy, but he was a co-founder of Technocracy. In 1954, M. King Hubbard is the guy who established the peak oil theory.
Oh.
He was the co-founder of Technocracy, right? The peak oil theory postulated, it's a theory for sure, it's completely proven wrong, but he said that reserves are going to go up. Proven reserves are going to increase, but at a point are going to start to fall because there's only a limited number of oil and gas, whatever, and that demand is going to go up, and the curve of the supply is going to go down, and the hydrocarbon industry is going to be destroyed. That was set in 1954. Of course, he was dead wrong. He couldn't have been any more wrong. But all of these people along the way knew that you could not control energy. And they saw that as these new reserves kept popping up, like in the United States, Mexico, Argentina, gosh, Canada. Oh my gosh, Canada is so rich with hydrocarbons.
Yeah.
The Mideast too, they kept getting, discovering brand new fields. And they saw that they could not control the hydrocarbon industry. Therefore, they couldn't control energy. Therefore, they couldn't control the economy or institute a technocracy.
Right.
So what's the answer to that? Kill the hydrocarbon industry.
Source, yeah.
Kill it. Get windmills. Get solar panels. Get ocean wave machines, whatever. That you can make a little energy, but do something that we can build and control ourselves so that we can control the economy.
Exactly.
That's exactly it. Because the economy requires energy. No energy in the economy, there's nothing. You got nothing.
Energy is our fuel source.
You're living in mud huts, right?
Yeah.
So energy the traditional energy had to be destroyed as they brought in this new wave of alternative, whatever, energy. And at the same time they've been doing this, is this march forwards, from 1992, here we are these years later, and we're looking at the fruits of their labors. We can see what they've done now. And it's been a stinking disaster by and large. It really has. Germany was the biggest proponent because there were lots of German Trilateral Commission members too back in the early days. They were one of the biggest implementers of alternative technology anywhere in Europe. Now, German government has said, we're pulling out. We're going to pull out by, I think it's 2018, we're going to pull out our entire investment on all this alternative energy stuff because they're going broke over it.
Oh, yeah.
It's a black hole.
Yeah.
And nobody told them that. In the beginning, it's going to be great. You'll see. It's a black hole.
Yeah.
So they're saying, we can't take any more of this black hole. We're pulling out.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So anyway, pretty crazy.
Yeah. You mentioned many times, that people should be able to rule themselves, of course. Can you explain how a more, free market solution would solve all the problems that, been perpetuated by the problem reaction solution, the Hegelian dialectic, that this heavy manipulated artificial markets we currently, see and are constantly escalating?
Right. What comes to first comes to my mind is the concept of individuality. And individuality as opposed to collectivism, as opposed to groupthink, group action. This is, the global village is for the global good,
Yeah.
Society was built, our society for sure, was built based on individual liberty and freedom.
Exactly.
These were viewed as God-given rights, unalienable rights, that if they weren't man, they weren't given by man, so they can't be taken away by man. But the concept of individuality is, if you have a mind to do something, as long as it doesn't hurt somebody else or interfere with somebody else's right to the same thing, then you should be free to do that. If you want to build a house or a structure on a piece of property that you own, if it doesn't, offend everybody in the neighborhood and it's not going to blow up or, create, smoke clouds or something that poison or whatever, you should be allowed to do that. And if you want to build a business, start a business, it's your money. Do what you want. Start a business. To the extent that individuality is suppressed by these people, you lose what you had.
Right.
Can you ever get it back? Maybe, but maybe not. Technocracy seeks to impose a scientific dictatorship where you will be ruled by policy, not by a person necessarily, but the technocrats call it the science of social engineering. So they take their discipline of chemistry, of physics, of geology or whatever, and somehow feel they're qualified to roll over the disciplines that they learned in those fields on society. So they can engineer society if they use scientific method. Well, that requires writing constraints for you because they need to control you.
Yeah, exactly.
They can't let you move left, right, up, down, whatever. You need to do what they want you to do. You're like the little ant in the ant farm. You get your son, your kid or whatever, and you follow the trail that's in there to follow.
Mm-hmm.
So individuality is diminished by technocracy. If they're successful, they will have it so controlled that it will be virtually impossible to break out of. And this is one reason I've been hopping up and down over this topic for some time now. It's a critically important topic. This is not political. People will say it's political. Well, we need to have a political solution. Well, maybe we do. But if you look, for instance, in America at our intelligence community right now, which is collecting everything in society, they're not supposed to. Our Congress slapped them down. Our court system has slapped them down. Whistleblowers have slapped them down. You can't do that. Whatever, repeatedly been told by Congress, don't do that.
Yeah, exactly.
6 months later, you come back, another story comes out.
Yeah,
boom.
still there.
They're not only doing it, but they're doing twice as much as they said they wouldn't do before.
Oh, exactly, yeah.
They're out of control. They've gone rogue, literally. They refuse to be corrected by Congress. They refuse to be corrected by the court system.
Yeah.
And so they're just collecting this data nilly-willy. So why are they doing that? Well, this is an expression of technocracy. Technocrats must have a monitoring system in place on their intended society so that they can, just like a manufacturing plant, so they can make their mid-course corrections and find out what policies need to be implemented.
Yeah.
It's a monitoring system. You couldn't go into any factory in America or in Canada, I might add, where somebody built the factory, who would have been an engineer. You can't find a factory that doesn't have a monitoring system in it.
Oh, exactly, yeah.
You have to know.
Yeah.
They think that way. This is what all this data collection is about. The technocrats are operating outside of the political structure of our country. They don't respond to Congress. They don't respond to the courts. And I dare say they're not going to respond to the executive branch either at this point.
Yeah.
If somebody comes in like a president like Trump and says, you can't do that anymore, they may say, okay, we won't do that anymore, but I'll just bet you 6 months down the road we'll find out. They just doubled down on it. They did more of it. So these people are operating as a fifth column within our system. They're not the traditional political actors we're used to dealing with. And they're building the system of complete 100% monitoring of every piece of data that you could possibly produce. And on the other hand, you have the smart grid being built out across America and Canada and other nations that intends to put these digital meters on the side of everyone's home and business so that they can monitor and control.
Yeah, exactly. What
all
is
the
going
energy
on,
coming and going.
Yeah.
And they've got enough data and they're already doing it. They're calculating your carbon footprint for you.
Yeah.
Based on what you do and what you buy and where you go. And well, you had to buy a plane ticket to come down here. Well, that's a ding on your record.
Oh, exactly.
Whatever.
How do you dare to go on a plane that pollutes? Yeah.
So this, between energy, control over energy like this, and the surveillance and the control over data and the Internet of Things rising up and stuff, nobody's looking at this. The politicians don't understand. I know they don't have a clue of what's going on. Fortunately, I have a technical background. I can understand the writings and stuff that they got. But these two things alone, there's more, but these two things alone as good examples are core ingredients for the implementation of technocracy.
Oh, it totally is, yeah.
Completely. Now, you talk about terrorists. I'm thinking of the Oklahoma building, the government building that was bombed several years ago. It was a bomb that was made. It's in a big truck. I remember they put it in a truck. It was the Murrah building, I think. But they put the bomb in a truck, and it was composed of fertilizer, diesel, I think, was part of it. They had like 4 or 5 ingredients, right? And so they put all those ingredients together and they ignited it, and she just blew the building to pieces. It was horrible. Well, that was all common materials available, right? It wasn't like thermite or something that you can only get from the military.
You can get that very easily accessible.
So now, if you were out and about society and you saw some guy, drives up in a truck to a fertilizer company or whatever, and he loads in, and he doesn't have a farm, and he buys up 2 tons worth of fertilizer and puts it in the truck, he's driving away. I mean, okay, you're going to be kind of curious. You say, this guy doesn't farm. He's not a broker. He's not selling it to a farmer. What's he going to do with that? You may not be concerned yet, but if he goes to the gas station and starts pumping diesel into 50-gallon drums in the back of his pickup, you ought to have a light bulb go on, right? And on down the line, when the other ingredients, you say, man, this guy's gone around, he's on a treasure hunt, he's gone around getting all this stuff. All the stuff he just bought are the ingredients to make a bomb like the one that blew that other building up. By that time, you ought to be bloody concerned, right? That he's got all the ingredients. He's done the.
Yeah.
He's actually got in his possession. Well, look. We have all the original writings of Technocracy from the 1930s. We know what they plan to do in order to implement Technocracy. They told us in black and white what needed to be done. Two things emerged immediately. You must control the energy, and you must control the data.
Yeah, and there you go.
Those are the two key things. So what do we see in society? Controlling data, right? And
Yeah.
controlling energy.
Yeah, and also with data, the new push for cashless society.
Yes.
I believe that is probably one of their policies as well.
It's very much part of it. It's very much part of it. And the cashless society is part of the no person left behind mantra that we hear at the United Nations all the time. The early technocrats also addressed that, by the way. They had the same idea, no one left behind. You can't leave anybody outside the system.
Yeah.
It won't work that way.
Oh, exactly.
So you're going to force everybody into the system. Well, by going to a cashless system in today's society, all the people that are in the black market, the brown market, that people that are kind of outside the system, there's lots of people. And America has like 20% of the people in America don't have a bank account.
Right.
They deal with cash. They go down to cash, they get a paycheck, they take it down to a cash checking place, and they pay a few bucks to get the thing cashed. And they take their money, put it in their wallet. They don't want to be in a banking system. No. That's part of freedom, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Of having liberty. And so all of these people that are kind of operating outside of it, and then you got all the homeless people too. They don't have bank accounts.
No, of course not. Yeah.
But everyone, lock, stock, and barrel, is going to be forced into the banking system once cash is gone from society. Everybody's going to be forced in.
Yeah.
And so undoubtedly, they're already talking about it, but what's going to happen is they will end up giving a debit card, some kind of a plastic card, to all those people that don't have anything right now.
Yeah.
And say from now on, you're not going to get your welfare check as a check that you can take down in cash. You'll just simply get a credit on your debit card. And you can go spend with your debit card.
And there you
Don't
go.
lose it.
Right,
You say, and you just go out and spend money using on your debit card. And everything will be done through the banking system. The banks will get their cut of everything you buy and sell. But you will be inducted into the system.
Yeah.
They're doing it in India right now.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Right as we speak.
Yeah, they banned
India's
the 500,000 rupee, but what came out, we did a video on that, and then of course we said this is a move towards cashless society. Well, sure enough, Modi just came out 2 days after and said he wants that cashless society.
And the people are almost in revolt right now.
Oh, it's
really
riots
ticked.
and protests everywhere in India, yeah.
It'll be interesting to see who wins.
Yeah, I know,
You know?
because 90% of consumption of goods in India is with cash.
Yes, I know. They're
Yeah.
not happy.
No.
But it's a good place for a test case for the global elite, I have to say. This is a central bank policy. This is not some local bank in India that cooked this up. This is a policy that's been floating around the central banks now for at least a year, probably longer.
Totally. They've had this idea for a while.
Yeah.
And now they're coming out and pushing it.
I know.
So with that, I think we're going to end our interview, but I really want you to tell everybody where they could find your work in this fantastic book here, Technocracy Rising. Where can we find and help and support you?
Well, Amazon.com is a good place to buy the book. There's also a Kindle version for those who like their Kindle Fires or whatever, and they can get that at Amazon.com. And if they go to my website, technocracy.news, they can get the book there. I always like to send out an autographed copy if they buy from me directly, so for whatever that's worth.
Yeah.
But if they go to technocracy.news, I highly recommend signing up for the mailing list that will send a digest of articles that I post to the mailbox, to their email box. And I curate stories from around the world relating to technocracy. I do it on a daily basis, and it's a great way to get kind of in the stream of things to understand, well, what are we talking about? Well, here's all the examples. Here's real life stories that are showing what we're talking about.
Right.
And I think it's important for people to see it with their own eyes. Don't just listen to me. I've written a book, right? Don't just say, oh, you wrote a book. Yeah, it must be true. No, people need to go and listen. They need to listen to the Group Brundtlands. They need to listen to the Christiana Figueres with their own ears and watch their lips
Do
move.
your own research.
That's right.
Very important.
And it doesn't take much to verify what we say is true, but people really need to see it, to grasp it. Say, yeah, it is real. It's not just somebody's conspiracy theory, right?
Oh, exactly. Yeah, so ending on that, Pat, I really appreciate the time that we spent together. A fantastic time. It's been a fantastic Congress.
Yeah.
So with that, it's John Sneisen and Patrick Wood signing out from World Alternative Media. You can find us on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. You could also help us by donating on our Patreon and GoFundMe. So this is John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
Thank you.